Good morning. So thank you all for being here this morning. This is a very special event for our Department of Plastic Surgery. We celebrate the advancement to Professor Emeritus of Dr. Ernest Manders. And that's a very esteemed title in the university. And Dr. Manders is going to be presenting his Emeritus lecture today. And to kick off the proceedings, we're very privileged to have Dr. Levine, Dean of the School of Medicine and Senior Vice Chancellor for the Health Sciences, here to present the Emeritus Certificate to Dr. Manders. Dr. Levine, thank you.
Thank you, Peter. And good morning to all of you. It's a great pleasure for me to be here with you to celebrate our colleague, Dr. Ernest Manders, and to enjoy his emeritus lecture. Although I have to acknowledge that because of my schedule, I can't actually stay for the lecture, but I'll enjoy it anyhow in spirit. Dr. Rubin asked me to say a few words about the significance of the status of emeritus. So as Senior Vice Chancellor and the Peterson Dean of Medicine, I'm happy to elaborate. For example, is Dr. Manders still eligible for the faculty discount on basketball tickets? The answer is yes. And does he get to keep his parking space? I'm sorry to put Dr. Rubin on the spot, but that very question is answered only at the chair's discretion. So if anyone is coveting Ernie's parking spot, this morning is the time to lobby your chair. In all seriousness, Ernie joins a very distinguished group of faculty that includes some of Pitt's most accomplished scientists and clinicians, and even a few of his own mentors. One of the great rewards of becoming emeritus is that one remains an integral part of the academy, but only the parts that truly interest you. To some extent, it means your time is your own again, and that is a reward that Ernie richly deserves. Over the course of 2 decades here, Dr. Manders has contributed a great deal to the field of plastic surgery through his peer-reviewed research publications and the translation of that research into innovative products, including those that aid in skin and nerve regeneration. He has served as a skilled surgeon here in Oakland, at the VA, and at Children's Hospital, and as medical director of the Facial Nerve Center. And he has done all of this during a time of unprecedented growth in plastic surgery at Pitt. Originally a division of surgery, the department was formed in 2012 as a reflection of the growth and maturation of its clinical training and research programs that Ernie helped to build. So in recognition of his many contributions to this distinguished history, and as a token of the esteem in which he is held by his colleagues throughout the university, I'm very pleased to present Dr. Ernest Manders with a certificate naming him as Professor Emeritus of Plastic Surgery. So Ernie, if you'll come up.
Boy.
I, in fact, will present you with the certificate.
Well, thank you.
And Dr. Rubens will introduce the lecture and possibly discuss your parking space.
Well, thank you. Yeah, wait a minute, just a minute. Thank you very much.
Great.
But wait, just a second. Before you go, Dean Levine, I want to say a thing or two about you. As it turns out, I've known 2 deans at Harvard, 2 deans at Michigan, 2 deans at Penn State, and this singular leader here at Pitt. And although I'm going to violate something, Sandra, which you taught me long ago, which I'm going to quote for this group here in a moment, I'm going to make a comparison in public. You're the best. Okay? And so thank you very much for the leadership that has made this such a rewarding place to live and work.
Well, thank you very much.
You betcha.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Levine. And well, Dr. Manders, we took a deep dive into your history the other night at graduation, and that was a wonderful opportunity to do so. And so I'm going to keep my remarks a little bit briefer now so we don't take away from your lecture. But we really thank you for the incredible contributions that you've made to our department at the University of Pittsburgh. And Dr. Manders has his roots in Canada, in a small island north of Vancouver, now with a population of 17, reachable only by boat, plane, or other craft. Or parachute, exactly. Dad was a chemical engineer, so they traveled around a lot. Started high school down in the south, but ended high school, graduated in a very place that's now familiar to all of us, Coos Bay, Oregon, where he met Sandra Manders before going off to Harvard for undergrad and medical school, and then Michigan for general surgery and plastic surgery. Dr. Manders started his academic career down the road at Penn State Hershey, where he rose to the position of chief of plastic surgery there, served for 10 years, and we were very fortunate to recruit him to Pittsburgh in 1997. And since that time has just been an absolute pillar of our department, master surgeon, educator, just fantastic contributor all around in many different clinical and research areas. And during that time has really been a wonderful contributor to all of our academic events, to discussions and grand rounds, someone who's been the consummate mentor for faculty members, for residents, and for students, and really spent his life teaching and sharing during his time here at the University of Pittsburgh. And we thank you for all of those contributions, and we are delighted now to hear your lecture on memories, dreams, and reflections of a plastic surgeon.
Well, Peter, thank you very, very much. First, I want to begin with some introductions. The most important person here, besides me, is my wife, Sandra. And Sandra, please stand. I'm going to... And I want to acknowledge sons Christian, who lives in Pittsburgh, and son Ernie, who's come from Cincinnati. Please stand up. Cindy, you please stand with Christian. Cindy Chung's one of our U.S. attorneys and wife of Christian. Yeah. Tom and Betty Hooker, please stand. Tom and Betty are best friends, and in fact, as you'll hear, they've played a major role in our lives in a special way that I'll recount. And then here is former Eagle Scout, and then Blue Band researcher working at Pitt as an undergraduate, medical student with honors, one of our best residents, and now a practitioner in Austin, Texas, Galen Walkman. Well, with that, I want to begin, because as always, time is always short. And I want to start out by saying Memories, Dreams, and Reflections is the title of Carl Jung's autobiography. And this talk is going to be sort of in that vein. It's not going to be a talk about how to do more operations better. It's a little different. And yet, first of all, the most important thing of all is to say thank you. It's been just a great honor to plan this and now to stand here and give it. And I hope you all do learn something from it, and I hope you enjoy it. That's, I think, of paramount interest to me, that you enjoy it. Now, I know there are some real gunners out there, and Dee Dee, not that you are one, but for you and Ed and Mike to distribute to all those of you who are residents and staff, here's a gift of classic plastic surgery, Jaws 4, the wonderful movie, an award-winning movie of how to make mandibles from the iliac crest, created by Ian Gordon Taylor in Melbourne, and our very own Bill Schwartz's video on osteocutaneous scapular flaps. This is priceless plastic surgery, and everybody here should know it. I think the last iliac crest flap done here was done by me and Alex Senchenkov up at the VA. It's a great operation. Everybody who does microsurgery will need to know how to do it. Mario, have you done one since then?
I've never done one.
Well, my gosh. Well, I know how to do it. I was taught by the creator, and next time you want to do one, I'm available, okay? So, as a follow-on, the greatest duty of an educator is to have hope. Who would have thought that W.B. Yeats would say such a thing? He had lots of good things to say about many things, and in fact, I hope that you will leave this auditorium today having learned something. And in fact, if nothing else, carry this, all those of you in academic medicine. There are really 5 important messages here, and they're all highlighted with a red Roman numeral to help you make note, okay? And I won't comment them other than to let you note their importance by the numeral. Now, I want to begin with a confession, and by the way, Winston Churchill said, you know, never begin with an apology. And I think that was very good, sound public speaking advice from one of the greatest public speakers of all time. But I do have to apologize in a way. Reports of my retirement are really greatly exaggerated. And in fact, I've realized that age is no less an opportunity than youth itself. And everybody here should be aware of that. Well, what I've discovered is the finish line is receding. It seems to be disappearing out there into space, and I'm sort of running, I guess, in a way, but not very hard, toward that. So what's going to happen now? Well, there's going to be more time to teach and see patients and occasionally operate, starting another company with a new idea with Christian. Unfortunately, with the loss of Gerard Evangelisti in Coos Bay, I have now a mature practice to run out there and keep going until we get 2 new plastic surgeons in town next July. And of course, seeing family. Crucial at this stage in our lives to see family. And so, I must tell you a brief story. I won a tour around the world as a surgical scholar in 1986 from the James IV Association of Surgeons, an elite group, I'm happy to say, of which I'm now a member. And 2 plastic surgeons, Longacre and Gertner, have been nominated by me and have had the similar same tour, which requires that you visit surgical centers around the world for 6 weeks total tour time and then write a report. And of course, one place I wanted to go was to go meet Ian Taylor in Melbourne. And so I traveled to Australia. Sandra and I woke up as Chernobyl went hot and was announced in the news. I'll never forget that day. And anyway, we went to see Ian in his rooms. That's the British Empire word for your office. And it was a marvelous place. Old woodcuts of Vesalius type anatomic drawings from the Middle Ages, and just incredible. And of course, he was doing all kinds of work, had fellows from all over the world, was lecturing all over the world, and then he had a life. He had a personal life. He was very involved in his community and his family. And I said, Ian, how do you find time to do this all? He said, Ernie, you don't find time, you make time. And that is a lesson I wish to impart. And that is one of the reasons we have decided to enter this exalted status of Professor Emeritus, is because Sandra has been waiting a long time. And now it's time for her and some of the things she wants to do. Well, I came from Ocean Falls, BC, and it was once bigger. We left. Now it's only 17. And it's if you ever want to get there, it's halfway between Vancouver and Prince Rupert. It's on the Inland Passage, and the ferry comes only once every 5 days. It comes at 1 a.m. It leaves at 2 a.m. And then you're there for 5 days. It used to be, after it was a vigorous, viable town with lumbering and pulp manufacture, they cut the logs up the stream until they would no longer float. And at that point, the business is over. You can't get the logs down. So no roads, no trains, etc. And the town slowly shrunk. The mills were dismantled and moved away. It used to have 47 people. They were bed and breakfast for bear hunting and salmon fishing. And then the province banned bear hunting. And so now the village is down to 17 people. Such is progress. Anyway, here's my father, Ernie Manders, out with his dog in the woods at Ocean Falls. And I've got to say, he was an impressive man. Among all the people I've known in my life, and I must say, I've known some pretty darn impressive people I admire, and in fact, they're admired widely, even worldwide. He was one of the most impressive people I ever have known. He built the biggest paper machine in the world in Childersburg. He could design a mill, supervise its building, get it running, which takes 2 to 3 years of good engineering, and then run it, doing everything from overseeing sales to labor contracts. More importantly, in a way, he figured out how to increase the machine speeds in the southeast, where we have pine trees, by half again. So instead of your machine running at 2,000 lineal feet a minute making paper, it can run at 3,000. And the discovery was how to get the pitch, which fouled the paper-making process because it floated on top and was sticky and would tear the sheet off the machine. He figured out how to precipitate the pitch. And without that pitch there, boom, the industry flourished, and now the entire pulp-making paper industry is in the southeast because pine fiber grows more rapidly. Well, we moved from north of Lake Superior to Sylacauga, Alabama. Wow, was this a change? And I've got to say, it was quite remarkable. It was a cotton mill town. Avondale Mills was there. B.B. Comer, who helped build it, had been governor of Alabama. You see Sylacauga sort of right there, and it's about 50 miles from Birmingham. And there, Sylacauga, 50 miles up to Birmingham. And basically, gosh, it seemed like 50-mile ride in a car when I was a kid was just forever. I can remember that. And what a culture shock it was. For one thing, of course, it was incredibly hot. And the South doesn't have such a great reputation today, but I want to stand here and actually defend it for my growing up as a kid. There were big life lessons there, like be a gentleman. The idea of Southern chivalry, be a gentleman, be civil, yes. It really was a way of life. You could walk up onto any front porch in those days and be welcomed, get a lemonade, have a swing on the chair, etc. Religion can be good, I learned, but even as a youth, I could appreciate it, can be repressive. Especially as a child, I learned really later. You grow up sort of accepting things as you are, you live in your little bubble, and I learned that when life segregates you, you should ask why. It took me a while to wake up to this, and nothing really awoke me like going away to college. And there I realized, wow, interesting how this whole phenomenon of segregation occurs and how it's built into you and how unconscious you are of it. Don't ever forget that. We're all living with biases. To an extent, it's survival based. Psychologists have studied this, and we gain all sorts of sort of impressions that guide our behavior about people and their behavior. And to some extent, it's like being on the savannah and seeing there's a big cat. Let's get out of here. But on the other hand, we make interpersonal decisions on the basis of previous experience or what we've been taught, and sometimes it's wildly off base. So all these classes that we have to take on, being aware and being non-discriminatory, et cetera, you know what? It's not a waste of time. I'm here to tell you. Now, amazingly enough, the Army, when I was in Alabama, helped me realize that, in fact, something was wrong in the South because we Boy Scouts, white and black, had massive camporees at the Fort McClellan, home of Chemical and Biological Warfare School in Anniston, Alabama. And so the only concession to race was there was a black barracks, white barracks, black barracks, white barracks. We all ate the same, went to the same latrine, ran around all day together, and learned how to shoot M1 Garand rifles and M30 carbines all together, okay? So you may have heard that old saying, ready on the right, ready on the left. You know what that's from? Commence firing. That's the way a military rifle range is conducted. And we just had a fabulous time as Boy Scouts together. There are absolutely no racial barriers whatsoever. It was an education. So I'll never forget, one day we were driving around and I saw a great big spot on the Methodist minister's lawn. It was black, it had been burned. And I said, Mom, what is that big mark there on the lawn? And she explained that it had been the site of a cross burning the night before. And I was stunned. I asked myself, I know the Andersons. How could this possibly happen? Well, I can't tell you the issues behind this, even to this day. We would all consider them foreign, I'm sure. But when I was a freshman at Harvard, guess who was the Methodist minister on campus? None other than Pastor Anderson. Well, time passed, and in 1972, I was interviewing at the University of Alabama for a residency in surgery. And as I drove in from the airport, I passed one integrated playground after another. And I thought, wow, that's pretty amazing. And for my little town, Sylacauga, I'm very proud to say that the schools were fully integrated without any spray paint, any broken windows, any rocks thrown, anybody arrested, etc. It was a very wonderful town, and people realized, I think, it was time for change. So I think there is really hope for our nation and the rest of the world as well. Well, after growing up in Coos Bay, or probably in Sylacauga to about 15, I moved off to Coos Bay with the family for a new paper-making opportunity. And I've got to tell you, in a word, I thought I had died and gone to heaven. So, why is that? Well, for one thing, when we arrived, here's the Charleston Boat Basin, and we lived on the bay in the trees on the far side of the boat basin across the big channel. It was a magnificent place. It was the biggest lumber shipping port in the world. The Weyerhaeuser plant alone along the bay was 1.7 miles long. The amount of logging and shipping, 34 ocean-going ships a month into the port, it was incredible. And all sorts of amazing people came to town to run this industrial enterprise and to go out and cut down trees in the woods and do it sometimes going up 80 feet and then topping the tree and then either making it a spar pole tree to log with a bunch of cables attached to the top, or just make a long pole that then you can do something else with. It was amazing, the people in Coos Bay. And also, and this is something for all of you to think about in a social context, I worked 7 years in the paper mill. That paid for 4 years at Harvard College and 2 years at medical school. Let that sink in. That's what a paying job would do in that era. And now I want you to ask yourselves, what the hell happened? I'm sorry. I wish I could explain it. But that's the difference between now and then. And you know what? This was one aspect of yesteryear that was really good. All right. Now, this is the best slide, in my opinion, of this entire talk. This is wedding day, August 24th, 1968. Did I get that right? and like today, it was raining. And I'm told the Greeks consider rain on your wedding day good luck, and it sure as hell has been. Because I look happy, but I'll tell you, I had no idea the scope of things that lay ahead for me and for Sandra. And I've got to say, Sandra, I just can't imagine life without you. I'm speechless almost in trying to say how critical you have been to my life. It would be nothing without you, and that's all there is to it. Well, here we're celebrating the 50th wedding anniversary. We're in this picture at the Lakeside Lodge, and that plate in front of us is the best clam chowder on the southwest coast. So if you're ever out there, we'll take you up there, any of you, and get you some clam chowder overlooking the lake. Oregon, of course, is a kind of a neat place. These are the Oregon jaws of life. And our family grew, and for 13 years, not having enough money to fly across the U.S., I'd try to get a month of vacation this summer. We'd drive across, see everybody, see the people of North Dakota, go up to Medicine Hat and over to Vancouver and down, and then go south sometimes and see the monkey in Omaha. Remember that, Christian? And ready to bite our fingers off. Anyway, all kinds of incredible experiences. And here's a picture from one of those years. We're on a walk along between Sunset Bay and Shore Acres, and this big tree is still there. You guys can get your picture taken. We ought to update this photo one day. And you see here in this picture, Ernie, Jonathan, Christian, and Joanna. And I want to tell you, wow, you think same gene pool, same house, under the same roof, eating the same food, hearing the same conversation, going to the same schools. Well, wouldn't they all be alike? No, okay? And you all should realize that, and I think for you younger people here and people early in your having a family, be prepared to be surprised, because in fact, as you shall hear, they're all very, very different. Now, again, I may sound like your Uncle Ernie going through some of this, but I think, quite honestly, there's a lesson to be learned here, and I hope you're sort of listening attentively to get the facts. So here we are, a few years later. This is my mother's 100th anniversary, my sister Cindy, and me. An immigrant, grew up speaking Norwegian, Swedish, and English. Immigrated to the United States, was naturalized. We were naturalized on that basis. Wife Sandra. Ernie, son of an immigrant. Jonathan, son of an immigrant. Jen, from Kiev, 2 generations back. Jewish tradition, moved to Montreal. Her dad was born Canadian, moved into the US, where she was born. The 3 kids, Fiona, Ernie, and Safi. Immigrant. This is Deanne, whose family hails from North Korea and literally exited North Korea with everything they owned in a sack on their backs in the Korean conflict. Son Linus of London. And over here, Christian, son of an immigrant. Dan, German, about 3 generations back, son of an immigrant, or daughter of an immigrant, Joanna, and Liesel and little Henry. So I bring this up because, and I'm sorry, you were in trial, I think, Cindy. So Cindy, daughter of an immigrant, okay, who now lives with Cindy and Christian in Bloomfield. So I bring this up because this is an American family that has only recently come. And I think it's germane given all the news of the day. So here's Mom, pushing 100, now pushing 104, and doing well. And here are Jen and Ernie. We had a little bit of a crisis there in Cincinnati. Jen has run a large comprehensive breast care program so successfully that, in fact, their university, Rush in Chicago, tried to hire them both away. And they made a very attractive offer, but quite honestly, their situation in Cincinnati is just so good, thank God, they couldn't be attracted away, which makes it a lot easier for us. Jen is a dynamo. Oh, wait a minute here. And here are the kids now, off learning how to ride a camel. And I must say, these kids are a heck of a lot better traveled than I was at their age. Ernie, Safi, and Fiona. So here's Linus of London. Linus here was born into a nursery in London. And when Jonathan came to visit, here was little Linus lying there. And of course, he's Asian. He looks very Asian. And because Deanne is Korean, of Korean extraction. And so the nurse looks up and says, well, he got your hair cut. Anyway, so here they are traveling. Deanne is an architect. So the family moves from Seoul. Deanne grows up in Brazil. She, of course, she's speaking Portuguese in Brazil, and it's through her Portuguese and Jonathan's Portuguese that they meet in New York and marry and so on. She moved at age 14 to New York. 4 years later, she has a Regents Scholarship to Cornell. Honest to God, we Manders are all trying to marry up. And so anyway, and here is young Linus, who's very interested in art, among other things, with Ashley Polisic. Now, I invite you all to go to the website, ashleysecil.com. This is a Pittsburgh artist who is big time. Sandra and I went to a gallery with her private artwork and sort of left saying, do we want a car? Do we want a painting? And the painting would probably be worth a lot of money in time, but due to Uncle Christian, knowing everybody, we were engaged by Ashley in an art lesson for Linus in the ornithology section of the Carnegie Museum. And here they are. She's working with them on a project to build translucent acrylic, not labels, but window covers to keep bird strikes from occurring. Because in the US, we lose 1 billion birds a year from bird strikes to windows. So that's what they're doing here. This is actually on an acrylic sheet that will go on a window. And here's Linus up close. We're offloading things, downsizing, and there goes my best geode and my trilobite off to Austin. And here are Cindy and Christian. Cindy's a U.S. attorney, trained, they were both at Yale, and then she went on to Columbia Law School, worked at the Justice Department in Washington, and as time happened, brought them together, and now they're both in Pittsburgh, where Cindy works downtown in the Federal Building. And the two of them are quite busy. Christian has become an incredible connector. He connects people with all sorts of interests, whether they're business or social, whatever. He is, in a way, Mr. Pittsburgh, and here he won the President's Award for PA Bio, a biotech industry organization, 3 or 4 years ago. Now, this was really a special study. Oh my gosh. So Christian and Cindy go to the Winter Olympics in Korea. Well, that's, ostensibly the reason, but no. The real reason was to introduce Christian to the family in the old country, okay? So the old country, it turns out, includes a very distinguished family, Cindy's mother's side, one of whom was head of what would be the American NSA and the American CIA. And so I'm sure Christian was vetted somewhere along the way. But anyway, the aunts met them getting off the plane, and immediately they had to get prepped for this photo shoot, which took like 10 hours. And so here they are doing the traditional wedding photo shoot in Korea. And I've got to tell you, Christian, no matter how you squint, they're going to know you're a gaijin. That's all there is to it. Anyway, a very, very handsome photo, my gosh. And so here's the crew in Santa Cruz. Why are they so happy? Because they just escaped living in San Francisco. Oh my gosh, how terrible. It's just an awful place for a family. And so here, these two guys are celebrating because they can go out into a backyard with grass. So when you guys are thinking of families and so forth, remember, there are lots of things to consider, and how kids live is part of it. So here's the little fellow, Henry, whom I call Mini-Me. And then Liesl, whom I'll show you in a moment, is just pretty amazing. At 5, she has learned how to write and but not learning this in school. She sort of learned on her own from books and things on the iPad and so forth. So it turns out they had her tested to sort of, learn about Liesl. Liesl went through a 2-hour set of tests, came home, and immediately sat down and wrote down 5 whole pages like this of all the questions she'd been asked. It was stunning. I'm not going to show them all to you. But anyway, as marvelous as I think they are, but they said, well, she has a 99.9% retention ability. Whoa, okay. So anyway, here's Liesl, and she's going to a life-saving class. In swimming lessons there, they're actually teaching them at this age how to be lifesavers. And one day at the pool, there were some frustrations, and so she came home and she did this. Bad day. My Band-Aids came off. A squirrel ate my lunch. My tiara broke. And I think this is just generally a bad mood here. So, as it turns out, David Baltimore, the recent retired president, about 10 years ago from Caltech, and his wife Alice Wong are very, very dear friends, and I'll show you them in a minute. Anyway, we were talking to David and said, David, listen to this wonderful, brilliant granddaughter we've got. Do you think she should go to Caltech? And he said, oh, yes, I think she should apply to Caltech. Okay, so the word goes out to Joanna, and Joanna says, Professor and President David Baltimore thinks you should apply to Caltech. And so Lisa looks up and says, when can I go? Well, anyway, the next thing is she's saying, oh, this is what you can look like in college. And I'm thinking, where do kids get this? I have no idea. Okay. Well, anyway, I'm going to speed up and give you a little bit more here. As it turns out, I learned at Harvard that, gosh, it was difficult. I've got to say, you go into a chemistry class, you get really bludgeoned. I'll never forget my first chemistry class. I'm an entering freshman. I've never had calculus. 2 weeks into it, they're deriving things with partial differential equations. What? So anyway, the first few years are pretty tough. But gradually I got better. And then eventually I was getting A's, and it was wonderful. And I think this is something to carry with you. The words of Chairman Mao, to learn how to swim, try swimming. And this was the Harvard College approach to education. You jumped in and you learned whether you could swim or not. And if you got an A in linear algebra, you could be a college math professor, okay? That's the way it worked. And if you struggled, you knew, draw a line through math. But anyway, it was quite an amazing thing, and actually this is the way we all have to learn in life. Sometimes you have to just try swimming and find out if in fact it's for you. Harvard Medical School was fantastic. Here's my buddy Collins Lewis with me. We're in Columbia. We're in a public health project in Columbia, and there are probably two less threatening, or I couldn't name two less threatening hombres than these two in Medellin. And this was before drugs, by the way, and it was a fabulous time. It was a fabulous time. And Harvard Medical School was 5 years, because I did a year of research there, that if I could relive, I would do it again. Boy, it was just a spectacular, every day, a spectacular time. University of Michigan, we raised our family, and here are Christian and Jonathan in a bubble bath. It was also a just wonderful, wonderful time. And I learned something very important when I was at the NIH, and that was, I had to ask myself the question, what do you want to do when you get up in the morning? That's a pretty fundamental question, because basically I was enjoying the research tremendously. I easily could have been an internist in medicine. Actually, the dean advised me to do that, but I wanted surgery. And I'd had a surgical internship at this point, and I realized, the thing that I miss is going to the OR in the morning. And so that helped me cement my decision to go back and finish training in general surgery at Michigan, and it was wonderful. And then off to plastic surgery. So again, I was very successful in general surgery. I was the administrative chief resident at the University of Michigan my year, and thank you, Cindy. I very much enjoyed that. And I was primed, given my NIH experience, to be a surgical oncologist and do virology and so forth and so on. Well, anyway, I had a whole bunch of plastic surgery friends, including Lou Argenta, who turned out to be a role model for me. And I saw that, gee, in plastic surgery you can do repair, not just extirpation. It was a new field, and I thought, wow, there are going to be opportunities. There are going to be opportunities for advancement, a quicker journey to the top. And if we do have eventually a national health service, well, what the heck? We will always have aesthetic surgery. So it turns out it was one of the more lucid moments of my entire career. And to my good fortune, when I started, here were Reed Dingman and Bill Grab as the people to train me. And two more distinguished people in plastic surgery have probably never lived. I would say especially Reed Dingman, without a doubt, one of the most impressive human beings I've ever known. So we went off to Penn State Hershey, and it was a wonderful place for all of us to grow up. And here you see the teepee in the Manders backyard, and Jonathan, and Rogerio Neves, who's now a full professor in plastic surgery at Penn State. This is when he was our fellow, and this year he won the Snyder Award, the top research award in plastic surgery. And this man here in the middle, why, that's Ranga Rangabasham, the head of the Madras General Surgery Service, and known for a radius of 500 miles around what is now Chennai. He led the training of Indian general surgeons for a huge part of the country. And here we have him decked out in my Order of the Arrow headdress. Honestly, it was a great joke. And of course, when this was shown in India, people went crazy. Well, anyway, so during my time at Hershey, wow, did things happen? Oh my gosh, look at this. Musculocutaneous flaps really came into their own. Microsurgery and elective microsurgery, not just replants, came into its own. Plates and screws, tissue expansion, liposuction, and fat transfer and vascularized composite allografts, those have really happened here at Pitt. But as a matter of fact, those other things were all happening when I was at Hershey. It was a very exciting time. And I had two mentors. Two absolutely wonderful mentors in my life. And one of them was this man, Timothy Harrison, whom I actually interviewed with in my application to Michigan. Dr. Harrison was born on the sands of Oman. His dad was Paul W. Harrison, a missionary. He grew up speaking Arabic. He went back to lead the American University of Beirut's surgical service for 4 years. He then went to help start the Aga Khan University, which is the flagship of Islamic medicine in Karachi. And then he went to Oman to work for 4 years to build surgical services for the state of Oman. And we got to visit him at Aga Khan and Oman, and he put me forward for the James IV Traveling Fellowship, and was a staunch supporter throughout my entire life, and I'll be forever grateful. And he was also a great soul. I'll be forever grateful for the role model he was, a remarkable person. And Alice and David Baltimore. Alice was my research mentor in medical school and lifelong friend. David got the Nobel Prize in 1975 for reverse transcriptase. Ernie, you were too young to remember, but 11 months of age and Thanksgiving, they were in our 3-room Harvard graduate student housing for Thanksgiving, and we have a nice picture of you at home on David's lap. And with a young David Baltimore and Alice. By the way, Dr. Levine, he's gone. Well, here's another example. There's all this business about professors don't date your students, your fellows, and so forth. David's postdoc. Okay, well, anyway, I kidded them about that. And but so much for that. Okay. Anyway, this is an 80th birthday at Caltech for David just recently, and all the speakers were there, former trainees, postdocs, and so on. And they included the Dean of Harvard Medical School, the President of the University of Michigan, and some people who are probably going to win the Nobel Prize. It was just amazing. Well, anyway, Alice has been at our backs for all these many years, and again, just a wonderful, wonderful person. And at Penn State, I got to meet some other really neat people. And in particular, this fellow here, Paul Brand, the Brand 3 operation for intrinsic reconstruction, the man who figured out the mechanism of tissue loss in leprosy, and this man, Burkitt's lymphoma. Burkitt's lymphoma. That's Dennis Burkitt, okay? Now, what's significant about both these men? Both of them felt called on finishing training to go to the developing world. Both of them felt called to go to Africa and India. And Paul Brand worked for 30 years at Valor Christian College, and Dennis Burkitt ranged over the whole continent of Africa. The retirement program for him was to lead the Hansen's Disease Hospital in Carville, Louisiana. We used to have a leprosy hospital in Louisiana. It's now been closed. And Dennis Burkitt eventually went back to the UK, and both these men, unfortunately, are now deceased, but they were incredibly inspiring. Well, invention is fun, and I have to give a nod here to Tom Hooker, sitting in the front row, who helped some ideas come to fruition, and who was instrumental in actually advancing plastic surgery. So I had the idea of differential expansion, where if you look and you just simply do the math, this curve here is, if this is 2 radiuses, this curve is about 3 radiuses. So the typical hemispheric expansion gives you 1/2 the base advancement. But I said, hey, what if you could make an expander with a base like this, but have it grow like this to make a breast, huh? And in fact, that was the basis for the differential expander. And here's the first iteration by Dow Corning Wright. And my gosh, we have almost 3 times the base here of the whole expander in the curve generated over the expander. This is one of the first differential expanders. Well, as a consequence of this and other designs, I got to lecture around the world. I helped introduce a whole new technology to my field. I built an international network of colleagues, which was just invaluable, because not only, I mean, it's nice for me to have friends, but I could send people to places. And for instance, in Brazil, for a number of years, every year, somebody from Hershey would go to Brazil, and staff or fellow from Brazil would come to Hershey. And I was gratifying to see my devices go to work around the world, and I got an invitation to court twice. Names I won't give you, but I will tell you we had to sue twice for patent infringement. And the second time, I must tip my hat to Sandra, because how would you manage a legal bill of $140,000 a month, month after month? Well, as it turns out, Sandra did it, and it proved to be well worth it. But I learned a lot about American business and how sometimes deliberate infringement is a business strategy. And in particular, if your sales are about $5 million or more, you can count on going to court. And Tom, you've heard me say this before, but I can tell you, having been in litigation twice, both times against these big manufacturers, the opposing counsel came up to me when it was all settled and said, "Who is this guy, Tom Hooker? He can really write one hell of a patent." And it's true, because the very first defense against infringement is an attempt to invalidate the existing patent at issue. And nobody could crack it, okay? Well, Tom, thank you very much. So, but all your best ideas may not be adopted, and here's one that, because of industry priorities and so forth, we never could get on the, onto the shelves of commercial companies, the adjustable croissant. This was made by Specialty Surgical Products and distributed for a while, but it never had enough oomph, and Christian and I said, hey, we can take this to market, and we raised the money to buy 2 companies, Cymatrix and SSP, but unfortunately the owner decided to go with a bigger purchaser who he thought would have more connections and so on, but not for that, we might be making that today. Onward. Well, at this time, after those years at Hershey, we got a chance to come to Pitt, and Bill, thank you very much. And I don't know whether you remember this or not, but soon after we got here, and Sandra and I had just literally opened the door in our new home, you and Annie came over, and Annie gave us this beautiful golden 4-leaf clover, and it still hangs on our mantle, over our mantle today. Thank you very much for that opportunity and that warm welcome, and thank Annie when you see her. And I must say, Bill really is another example of leadership at the top makes one hell of a difference. Oh my gosh. You can survive anything with the right colleagues and enjoy it, and he was instrumental in making great opportunities. One of them was going to Kyoto University. And I must say, of all the surgeons, and I've known some fine academic surgeons, I've only known 2 who've ever taken a sabbatical. One was Bill Pierce, father of the Penn State Lionheart, and the other was me. Now, hear this. For all you academics, you need to think about taking a sabbatical. 7 years, and then you get a period of time which is variable. You can adjust it up to a year, and you need to do it. You do take a big cut in salary. You got to want to do it. But boy, what an experience this was. Gee whiz. That's a subject for another rounds, and in fact, I've given that in the past. And here's, you meet great people. This is the just retiring then President Nagao, and he was succeeded by a fellow whom I got to know, who was a volcanologist, and I thought, how wonderful to have this man as president. He does calligraphy, and you see, here's one of his latest productions, and he's teaching us nothing is better than learning. what a motivation and what a testament to the appropriateness of this man being president of a university. Well, the future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. You have to dream. And this brings me to a dreamer, Bill Futrell. And one day, this is just one of the wise things Bill has said to me over the years. One day in his office, Bill listened patiently as I was bitching and moaning about something, and he said something that I think is very important. The universe doesn't care, but the corollary is it won't stand in your way either. That's a really important lesson. So anyway, being dreamers, we decided to start our own company. Christian came out of college as a history major and went right to work with his roommate and buddy, Charles Wachter, who said, Manders, and Christian was fluent in Japanese. He had an offer to go work in Japan, but Wachter said, Manders, you better go to Pittsburgh and commercialize your dad's patents, and I'll come with you. And he did, and these guys slept on the sun porch for the summer, and then Charles went off to film school at New York University and is now a big producer in Los Angeles, marked for success. So anyway, our business is going on 21 years now, which in biotech terms is a pretty long time. And here we are, one of our early trade shows, and here's a lecture from Japan. I was a visitor over there for a series of lectures, and Sandra was invited to give a talk on starting your own business. And her talk filled the room to standing room only, and it was much bigger than her audience was much bigger than any of mine. And so Sandra, congratulations, great talk. We make Gamma Graft and Reprisa. All you guys ought to be using Reprisa, I must tell you. It was no accident how we came up with this. We wanted something extremely safe. This has no envelope viruses in it. So HIV, hepatitis A, hepatitis B, and CMV, there's none. And it comes ready to use. You just open the bag, you put it in, there's no washing, there's no soaking. It's also, there's no sidedness, and it's less expensive by a margin than all the other things out there. So I learned a thing or two, though, in doing this. One thing is, we were accepted by the Department of Defense, and basically they said, this stuff should be available for any forward military hospital. That was really a kudo coming from the head of the Army Burn Service, Leo Cancio, whom we've known for, probably 20 years. And we learned also that, dealing with CMS is just incredible. And it is truly, it's just amazing. And maybe we're bad businessmen. But we wanted to respect the gift of the donors, and Gamma Graft is the cheapest skin substitute on the market. Now, burn unit story. So, having been in marketing now for a little bit, I must tell you there are a few things that we learned which were quite incredible. You can't imagine what drives medical decision making. So here I am speaking to a head of one of America's biggest burn units. We're from here to here. And I've known this guy for years. And I say, let's say, Bill, you should have your patients dressed in Gamma Graft in the ER at presentation. You watch them overnight to see they're okay. Then you send them home the next day. They don't need any antibiotics. The wound is closed. They don't need any analgesics. The burn is covered. They can shower in this stuff at home, bathe in it, wear clothes over it. They need no dressings. And my gosh, it would save the whole system money. So what does a burn unit director say to you when he hears this? He says, Ernie, why would I want to do that? I'd have to reduce my burn unit staff to 1/2 or 1/3 of what it is now. That's the power base. And so, the comfort of the family and the patient, et cetera, they didn't quite make it. Well, here's something from Reed Dingman. Ernie, people who say money can't buy everything haven't been shopping in the right places. Now, here's a very important thing for you younger people. I must tell you that we have a great friend, Nelson Piccolo, who's just loaded with good information and good judgment. One day I was talking about how we here in Pennsylvania only get about 2/3 of what our neighboring states get in terms of academic salaries. And he said, Ernie, in Brazil, and that's how you spell it in Portuguese, that's not a misspelling, we have an expression for this. So when you guys are negotiating about your salaries and all sorts of other related things, remember this, the expression from Brazil. how much can you eat? I am telling you, this will put your feet on the floor when you're talking to people and they say, oh, I'm getting $500,000 this, I'm getting, I'm going to be a millionaire in 3 years and all this sort of thing. Just ask yourself, what about the opportunity? How much can I eat? And this is just a very, very good grounding rule. So now a few thoughts about being a doctor, and thanks to my teachers. Here, not a direct teacher, but somebody I admire. Always be kinder than necessary, for every person you meet is fighting some kind of battle. This is true. Be aware. Be aware. And now, some other good advice. Never make comparisons in public. I'm sorry, Sandra, I apologize. And another person's success is not your failure. And I've actually used this with a number of colleagues who have been vying for various appointments and maybe finished second, and they were grateful. I mean, it really buoyed them up to just have this understanding. And then I want to ask, do you guys know what you're supposed to do as a doctor? Have you thought about it? Here's The Doctor by Sir Simon Luke-Fildis. This is in the Tate Gallery in London. You should see it if you ever go to the Tate. Here's a doctor, and the child has typhlitis, an old term, probably appendicitis. And when Judith Folkman showed this to Harvard medical students and said, what's your reaction to this? 70% of them said bewilderment, ignorance, helplessness. Nobody saw a caring doctor, or almost nobody, or somebody there to support and do whatever he could compassionately. It's a sign of the age, and it's a sign of how we're training you guys. Here's something from Picasso, 1897. Science and caring. On one side, the doctor. On the other side, a nun. Well, what is the most important thing? You're supposed to alleviate anxiety. And you should bear this in mind with every clinic visit you attend. It's one of the most important things we can do. And I learned this at Michigan, where in doing general surgery rounds with Dr. Thompson, we'd walk into one room and he'd say, Mrs. Smith, I'm sorry to inform you that you have pancreatic cancer. But the good news is you can have an operation. We'd walk out the door, go one door down, walk in the room. Mrs. Jones, I'm sorry to inform you that you have pancreatic cancer. But the good news is that you don't need an operation. And of course, those of us standing behind our leader realized the implications of those two statements, but also we learned about compassion. Now, we had a patient who had a penicillamine-induced pseudoxanthoma elasticum at Penn State. She had Wilson's disease. She had years of taking penicillamine. It stops collagen cross-linking, and at 34, she looked like she was 84. It was tragic, the quality of her skin and how it just fell from her face in festoons. We got an insurance company to say, we'll let you do a facelift. We understand, the pictures told everything. So Fred Grazer came out to do her facelift as a visiting professor. Fred actually counseled our guys and had them live in his home to teach them aesthetic surgery for 6 to 8 weeks. Well, Fred is talking to this patient, and he looks over, he says, now this is a big operation. What is the worst thing that could happen? And the patient looks serious and says, I could die? And he says, yes, that's right. What's the second worst thing that could happen? And she doesn't know the answer to this, and he leans forward and he says, I could die. Now, this is a masterful interplay between patient and doctor, and you need to learn things like this. You need to learn how to be a good doctor. Your job is not to play God, and I want to recommend this site to you, aish.com. It is a site from Israel. It is rabbinical in nature, and it's loaded with good information and wisdom and good counsel. And as you may know, Charles Krauthammer just died, and there was a piece written by one of the contributors to this website about, with reference to Mr. Krauthammer, but also about, should doctors stand up in front of people and say, you're going to die, and say when, okay? And the the fact is it's probably not a good idea. And if you read the Talmud, it's not a good idea. So I'd recommend, if you go to aish.com, you can read this very entry. It's still up there and so forth. It's very, very good. Krauthammer said, my father said, I can't make you religious. I can't make sure that you'll be religious, but I am going to make sure that you're not ignorant. Read this website. Well, plastic surgery is not about vanity, and I want to repeat a story that I've given it round several times. I was at a scrub sink. We were doing breast augs and so forth, and I sort of looked over and I said, Dr. O'Neill, are we prisoners of the Playboy philosophy, doing all these breast enlargements? He said, Ernie, you're a smart guy. You know a lot, but go home and read the Bible. And in the Bible, in the Song of Songs, this chapter and verses, we have this is headed, by the way, in the New American Translation, the woman's brothers speak. We have a young sister, and she hath no breasts. What shall we do when a young man comes courting? Really? Is it important? What's the significance of this? Well, it's a secondary sex characteristic, and they want their sister to be attractive. If she be a wall, we will adorn her with towers of silver. If she's withdrawn and not engaging, we will dress her up. But if she be a gate, we will protect her with panels of cedar. If she's promiscuous or too open in compensation, we'll protect her. So may we conclude that appearance affects interpersonal relationships? Well, I think we must. We all know that. And it's as old as the Bible. On moving, and you all will, I want to tell a very brief story, which you may have heard before, about a traveler who's going to another town, and he encounters somebody coming toward him, and the guy says, the person coming forward says, how is it from where you come? And the traveler, I guess, asks, how is it where you're coming from? And the guy who's traveling says, well, how is it where you've been? And the guy says, oh, people were terrible. They were always trying to pick your pocket. They were trying to take advantage. There was petty fighting every day. I just hated it there. And the fellow who's been addressed says, well, proceed, and you'll probably find it much the same. And as he goes a little farther, he comes to another person, and this fellow says, how is it from whence you've come? Or he says, yeah. And this man then turns the question, well, how is it from where you left? He said, oh, it was wonderful. Everyone was like family. Everybody cared for my well-being. It was so successful, I loved it. And the man says, well, proceed. You'll find it much the same. And indeed, yes, I'm a parrot head. Jimmy Buffett got exactly right. You can make the weather, and you can take it with you wherever you go. Don't forget that. And also for you young people who are going to be looking for work, don't forget there are more good opportunities than there are good people. When I heard this, I could hardly believe it because I was applying somewhere at the time, and now I'm absolutely convinced this is true. You're going to be good sailors, but don't forget to ask where you're going. You don't want to get to the top of your ladder and find out you're on the wrong wall, okay? And this can happen. You need to look beyond yourselves. You need to read The Grapes of Wrath. You need to read Wind, Sand, and Stars by Antoine Saint-Exupéry, who wrote The Little Prince. And you need to, in Wind, Sand, and Stars, note his description of prison. And remember what he says is the prison. He describes a man who goes to a rock-breaking quarry every day in chains. He's using a pick. He breaks rock all day long and then goes back to a cell. And the author asks, what is the prison? Is it the room with the bars? Is it the island he's on that he can't escape? He said, no, the prison is the pick. Because the man is forced to do every day what he doesn't want to do. Oh, who is the Reverend William Barber? What is the Poor People's Campaign? You should learn. You should inquire. You should be engaged. And you should always learn from the great souls around you. So look outward and try to change things for the better. And here I want to put a public word in again. Thank you, Peter Rubin, for backing the idea of going to Coos Bay and trying to start a rural residency with the idea of encouraging young people to go into practice in a non-urban area. Not necessarily a small town. There are plenty of medium-sized towns that don't have plastic surgeons, but they're 120 miles from Seattle or Portland or whatever, or Minot, North Dakota, etc. So, again, as some of you have heard, hey, if you look up and you see the Milky Way, that's what this is. I've showed this, and in some audiences, people didn't even know what they were looking at. Yeah, because 80% of America can now not see the Milky Way due to light pollution. You can't see it in Pittsburgh. In Alabama, when I went out camping as a Boy Scout, lying in my sleeping bag looking up, oh my gosh, the Milky Way was incredible. You can't see it here because of light pollution. The good news is, if you can't see the Milky Way, you have a doctor. And the bad news is, if you can see the Milky Way, you don't have a doctor. You're rural. So, about, I don't know, let's say 55 to 64 million people live in rural USA. It's a huge part of our nation, and it produces the food, the trees, and other building materials, the energy. And we've got to have people out there doing that, or we people in cities will be left high and dry. Here's a rural density map, and of course Coos Bay is there as rural. 48% of hospital districts have a critical shortage of surgeons in the United States. 18%, that's almost a fifth, don't have a single surgical specialist in a hospital district, a federal hospital district. 54% of American counties do not have any OBGYN care. What? This sounds like sub-Saharan Africa. What the heck? And also, another thing I learned after getting engaged and going out there was what a doctor contributes to his environment, to his hometown. My gosh, a huge amount of money. In the case of the Bay Area Hospital and the North Bend Medical Center, and there's one other clinic in town, together they're about $100 million a year. This keeps the town alive. Aside from literally keeping them alive from pneumonias and broken legs and so forth, it pays school taxes, it gives people a living. Medicine is a vital part of our economy. It's between 10 and 11% of gross national product and every state gross national product. And I've got the map to prove it if you want to see it from the AMA. So we've got way too few plastic surgeons in the rural areas. And in fact, if you look at this map, there's no surgeon that says in Coos Bay. There is, of course, now Alexei Markelov. And next July, I hope there will be 2 more there. One married to a Mohs dermatologist who's also needed in the area. So we're coming to the end here, and I want to say your career is its own reward. Here I am sitting in the Trader Joe's parking lot about 3 weeks ago, and my phone bleeps, and I get this message out of the blue, just sitting there. Hi, Dr. Manders. This is Dennis March. 20 years ago today, you saved my life. I was life-flighted to you with flesh-eating bacteria, and you knocked it right out of me. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for letting me carry on with life. You were my miracle. Thank you again. And I want to share something from a movie. How many people here have seen The Replacements? Okay, then you know this scene. The Replacements features a pro football team, goes on strike. Coach Gene Hackman comes in, is tasked with assembling a team, and they're going to continue the schedule for the owners and play pro football with this replacement team. It's a very engaging movie. You'll love it. Try it. And at one point, the quarterback, played by Keanu Reeves, whose name in the movie is Shane Falco, sort of dithers. He's not decisive in a goal line rush. And the coach says to him, winners always want the ball when the game is on the line. This is a great teaching moment. And that's what we're preparing you for. We want you to all feel, hey, when the big problem is up there in front of you, put me in, coach. I'm ready. I want the ball. And now, a benediction courtesy of Bob Dylan, who, by the way, at the end of his Nobel address, quoted Homer, saying, "Hear me, O Muse, and speak through me." So, with the grace of and the accomplishment of Bob Dylan, I want to present you with the words of Forever Young. May God bless and keep you always. May your wishes all come true. May you always do for others and let others do for you. May you build a ladder to the stars and climb on every rung. May you stay forever young. May you grow up to be righteous. May you grow up to be true. May you always know the truth and see the lights surrounding you. May you always be courageous. Stand upright and be strong. May you stay forever young. May your hands always be busy. May your feet always be swift. May you have a strong foundation when the winds of changes shift. May your heart always be joyful, and may your song always be sung. May you stay forever young. Thank you very much for this honor and the honor of working with you every day. And by all means, come and visit. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, Ernie, that was fantastic and such amazing contributions and vision. And I've got to say that the impact that you've had is well reflected by how full the room is and how many family and friends and the warmth in the room for this event. And I will validate your claim that news of your retirement has been over-exaggerated because Dr. Manders is by all means going to still have clinical privileges here, and we'll still have your office at SCAFE. We'll see about the parking. That may be above my pay grade, but we'll see. But truly, this was fantastic. We thank you for your amazing contribution, and we look forward to a lot more. Now, there is a very special, coveted Pitt Panther here on the podium,
Yes.
and this is for you in recognition
Fantastic.
of this event and your service and your advancement to Professor Emeritus.
Lovely.
So congratulations.
Peter, thank you very much. Great, thank you.
And we
Thank
look
you.
forward to another 20 years of contribution at Pitt.
I'll do my best. Okay, good.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.